Say, hey guys, how's it going? Today's a new format, and just doing something a little bit ad lib here. And I have someone with me, an acquaintance, a good friend, and yeah, I just thought we would just try this conversational format on various topics that come of interest to us, and just have a bit of back and forth on anything ranging from things that are eternal to things that are significant and current during this time, things happening either politically or newsworthy items or ideas on justice or what it could be anything or whatever, theological, philosophical. And we got a couple of topics today. We're not going to list them off right now. We'll let you discover them as we unfold and go through. So, go through them. So you guys already know a little bit about me. I'll let my friend introduce himself as he wants. And yeah, take it away.
Greetings, people. Well, earlier today I thought of various topics that my friend and I could discuss. Topics of weight, topics of relevance, topics of practical import. So what I did was that I wrote out 100 topics and then I cut it all up and put it in a hat and shook it all around. These topics have a decidedly biblical perspective. I am a Christian. I've read the Bible in depth. I'm well acquainted with the Hebrew language and to a lesser extent with the Greek language. We, of course, welcome various criticisms, various additions, any type of commentary. Now, the topic that cropped up in many ways is a general topic, but it is a critical topic as far as our lives go. Simply, what I drew out the hat was titled Work. Now, I believe that a very simple approach to all questions is a very simple type of logical approach where we just look at an overview in terms of the good old 5 W's and a how. And of course you can, if you want to be cute about it, you can substitute the how for a way. There you go, you got 6 W's. So we're looking at this topic of work. And as a biblical theologian, I'm interested in what the scriptures say about the topic, but not only is it mere interest, nor is it casual. I perceive, in my opinion, that in all matters, the Bible is a completely glorious work. The depth is such that you will not find any such wisdom anywhere else, not even close. The doctrine's there, the concepts, the psychology in terms of devotional application, what that book reveals to us about humans and of course God. Coming to fulfillment, of course, in the revelation in the New Testament of the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And here, I'd like to add that one of the things that impressed me and was instrumental in my conversion around 30 years ago was the incredible singularity of Jesus Christ. I mean, everything that this one said was a wait for moment. All right. The quality of the person, the nature of the message, but just the glorious, glorious wisdom that you don't find. So, I'm sidetracking somewhat, so I will then say that what is said in the Old and New Testament pertains to this topic of work, which was my introduction. So we will look at the 5 W's and the how with respect to that topic and deal in greater depth maybe with the uniqueness and singularity of the Lord Jesus Christ, which is a huge topic, in greater depth later. So we've got the 5 W's and the how here. So we've got work. Well, what is it in essence? When you think about it, is it just simply a job, an occupation? Is money a critical feature about what work is? Should it be hard? Should it be pleasant? Should it be unbearable but nonetheless tolerated? Should it be according to one's talents and one's gifts and one's interests? So when we think of it, often we see that work is, one general thought is that work is not play. Play generally denotes something of pleasure, usually. Nearly always, I'd say. Play. That is not work. Of course, some may be taking great pleasure in their work, some might not be stressed by their work, some might be very, very pressed by their work and have little enjoyment in it and make little money from it. Some might have what they call as work and maybe even what society calls as work, and they make a lot of money for doing very little. So what is it in essence? Generally, it tends to be something that people don't altogether like to do. Or if they had a choice, most people would, if they had the money and the wealth, would certainly not do any formal type of work where they are under a boss or had to run around or had to invest capital. Or they might do something to keep themselves interested. That's the majority. Some people, however, would get very bored, and whether motivated by a need to make money or build, as it were, empires of various kinds, or even altruistic motives to help people feel driven to do something. There's something that does what? Give them fame, make them popular with girls, or just enable them to build more and more houses. And some will work, this is very few by the way, who will, when I mean work here, expend energy, really overcome pain in the process, whether that be intellectual, whether that be a scientist that does experiments. Who was it that, was it Edison that is attributed the quote, science is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, with that hard mental racking that real intellects know about, with it coming often not so good health, great oppressive headaches, and so on. And and we can see that the idea of some type of some sort of effort, and often a type of overcoming is involved. Like, you resent it at times. You don't want to get up in the morning. You don't want to have to deal with that person that you find annoying and causes you anxiety. There's this idea that needs to be emphasised again. It's going back to this is not like pleasure, or more often than not, it is not pleasure, or it certainly involves elements that are unpleasurable to a large extent. Whether it's somebody going down a mine, there's danger, there's somewhat rarefied air. Even in a modern world, there's often like some not so nice, let's say, vapours, wet. Same as if somebody goes out, just has to work outdoors and endure the bitter cold. And I really feel for people who live in extremely cold climates there. But also burning heat, and that naturally is somewhat a trial to endure.
Yeah, so just to run along with your line of thought there, the idea of defining it, I got an internet definition here that I think what most people talk about work, they mean something like mental or physical activity as a means of earning income, employment kind of thing. That's a fairly narrow definition. The more broader one would be any activity involving mental or physical effort done in order to achieve a purpose or result. And I think you've touched on both of those pretty much. The more general, any sort of activity of mental, physical effort with a purpose or result, and the more restricted one while we're talking about as a means of earning income. And this, I think most people think of it as a means of earning income, especially the groups that I am involved in, like the NEET community and stuff like that, because they've been characterized by economists as being either not in employment, education, or training. And those activities of education or training are for the sake of employment. Because economists, that's all they care about, is increasing productivity, for the country, so that they could get increased GDP, right? And there's always a prosperity from this idea of increasing growth ad infinitum. So yeah, I just thought I would chime in there.
And that's very good, because in an extemporary type of format, without notes to consult, some definitions to keep one on track and to help one not repeat oneself, I think are necessary. Yes, indeed, the idea of earning income. Now, biblically, there's the idea of provision, the idea of one doesn't provide for their own. A father for his family, a husband for his wife, we could also add there, and I don't wish to offend any feminists out there, but this idea of provision, that there are circumstances that whatever you can do within a moral context to provide necessaries for living ought to be attempted, and one ought not to be despondent in that effort.
Yeah, this is really good. So we're entering like ethics and morality now. This is awesome. So, especially with like I said, the communities that I touch base on, like a lot of NEETs would be either not employed or in any of those other stations of life education or training because either of like physical disabilities, or there'll be like some sort of mental disabilities. They'll talk about stuff like depression, chronic depression, this experience of laying down and rotting, in bed all day, not able to get up from mental torments. And then there's ones that choose it as a style of life. They make fun of the so-called wagie, the one who chooses to do the 9 to 5, every day, and they look at that sort of lifestyle and say this is a waste of life. You're giving your best years of your life to an employer that doesn't deserve it. You should be spending more time on self-development, whether it be intellectual, physical, working out, whatever, giving back to your community directly in some way, rather than just doing it as a means of like getting paper money in your bank account. So that's one community, the NEET community. Another community, the Doomers. For them, it's more of like they hate the fact that they're stuck in this dead end, low paying 9 to 5 sort of a job, whether it's working at the 7-Eleven, at some sort of convenience store or whatever, and they don't see that they see themselves like the rest of their life is going to be like this. They see that they look into the future and they're like, wow, I'm stuffed. There seems to be no meaning or purpose to life because I'm not going to get anywhere materially. It's never going to get any better. And they cope, they usually cope with their predicament through either alcohol or smoking or going out on late night walks and stuff like that. So this is not like meant to be a mocking their predicaments. This is just to get another person's perspective, on these sort of things, situations that people find themselves in, And since we're entering into the sphere of morals, it's cool to get another perspective, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I invited you to contribute.
There seems to be two groups that you just mentioned. There seems to be the one that feels that they, or who don't want to work, they don't want to be part of, society's programs and progress. And there's another.
Yeah, those are by choice. And then there's ones that feel like they're forced, like they have a physical disability, a mental disability, they're suffering torments, they want to get out, but they find they can't. They feel like they can't because, I don't know, maybe they're missing a leg, right? And they can't find employment, or they're have some sort of muscle disease, and they're essentially weakened, right? Those are like, they're forced into being a NEET.
Oh, excuse me, then there are three groups. There's those who brazenly feel that they don't need to. Well, that's fine if you've got money and resources. If you, for whatever reason, were privy to gifts or inheritance, or you made money from some speculations in the past or whatever, that's that position. Well, there are not a great percentage, there is not a great percentage of the population that would fall into that category, I wouldn't imagine. Then there are those who have a real disability. They've got like an afflicted life. There's particularly one can feel great sympathy for those who were born or by dint of accident have lost a limb or eyesight and such things. This is terrible. To give perky advice, is not altogether helpful. To be of useful support in some way beyond just obvious advice that has some value. These people have been dealt a hard card, really, and I'm tending to talk. I know it's very difficult to talk about the will of God in these matters, but I'm talking about these who definitely, without any without any action of their own, seem to have been afflicted by something. You know, they haven't jumped off a bridge, although again, there's issues there, but they haven't done this by one could say so much self-cause. There's a lack of self-cause. They have been given. It's like they were somewhere and a bomb went off and they've lost a leg, rather than they went and they chose to jump off somewhere and they became criminals.
Yeah, they could be army vets. Yeah, and a lot of them, not a lot of them, but what I'll say is what I've seen in the forums is contemplation of like suicide, especially when they see that their parents are going to die and they're going to be left with nothing, like they're going to have no means of income, and so they see better as offing themselves than to continue as a homeless person, let's say, because they know they'll be on the street once their parents are dead because they're disabled in some way, right? And so a lot of them have this sort of a mindset as well.
Well, there's that beggar that in the Bible, and it seemed like they were in a wretched state. Of course, again, this is while the parents are around, the person can live, but there's nobody to take over. It seems they could be in a dire way. Yes, this is a miserable type of existence. While some well-meaning folks say that, oh, you can, it's still all up to you and that you can still be very happy in that state. Unfortunately, those burdens that the maimed and the lame have are extreme. They can't get out, they can't move around, their health will be often poor, they are dependent on people. It is a terrible existence, and it takes great bravery, it seems, to rise above that and become someone special. Obviously, if you can't physically do a whole lot of things, you have to then use your intellect. One need only think of Joni Eareckson Tada in this example, well known amongst the Christian world, who was a very lively, extremely good looking young woman who had a terrible accident and was totally paralysed. I believe she could really only, she could not even use her hands. So she learned to draw with her mouth. So, but this person was able to rise above this. I believe God gave her a wonderful partner, which that incidentally could be something that makes the difference. If a person finds true love. And this is, of course, just to digress a little bit, often one of the great problems with depression. People simply, they don't have anything that could be called true love with another person. For the Christian, that's a member of the opposite sex. And so they feel desperately alone. This contributes to the misery. After all, the partner is meant to be a helper.
Yeah, I get that from Genesis 1, yeah.
So it's wonderful when you see God work and provide people with some mitigation through that emotional fulfillment of a life's partner. And I mean this beyond, although it is still useful, friends, beyond mere friends. And then we have that other group, of course, don't we, who are people, and I think we could say the great majority of the world is stuck in this position. These are people who have low income, and often work that is extremely boring. It is a drag. It is often unpleasant in terms of, the toxic chemicals they work with. It could have a danger element, or it could be simply horribly tedious.
Yeah, once we enter the topics of like work, I think we sort of essentially get tied into other discussions, the corollaries like rights of citizens, because work is like an institution that's like bedrock. Um, it's a kind of like bedrock of the culture. It's like an institutional framework, right, that sets up the culture as a whole. And if we had like I talked about this before in some of our previous discussions, that it seems like at the very least, to be useful to yourself, to be able to like provide for yourself, it seems like every citizen should have some sort of parcel of land so that they can develop for themselves, at least agriculturally. Like I read Aristotle's economics, and his whole framework for economics is household management. And how can you have household management if you don't have a household? If you don't own the land, you have no household. You're a slave to the rent owner, right? Pretty much. You don't have your own land. You cannot be a household manager. So, in essence, you're like a slave, even by Aristotle's sort of definition of household management and economics. So, yeah, I would be very pro. I'm not pro laziness. I do consider myself a NEET, being not in employment and stuff like that. I'm not pro laziness. I am pro like this idea of, well, you're a citizen. You should at least be able to like feed yourself agriculturally. That was the traditional means. What are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the corollaries are massive. We're venturing then into some practical advice as to solutions or something that helps, although it might be somewhat naive to speak of solutions as such. But you mentioned then ownership of property, and whether that be land, and if you had a right to at least put a tent or a shed without conflict, so you had a covering from the elements. Of course, it might not be seem feasible in a city because you're going to get, let's say, ugly tents everywhere and sheds, and you're going to get basically, what we see in the US, sort of, but trailer parks, albeit with ownership. But there could then be solutions proposed to that, such as co-ops, kibbutz style co-ops between people.
Like communes and stuff, yeah.
Yes, there are people out there.
Guys have talked about that, and even in the communities, like the NEET communities, there's people that are open-minded that they're like, hey, we're all like-minded individuals. Why don't we get together and have like a commune or something? We could work together and actually help each other out rather than laying down and rotting in our rooms individually, right? And I find that I find that interesting, sort of an idea. I don't know if it would work, um, but yeah. Also, there's just to get back to like Aristotle's idea of economics. He obviously had an ancient view of economics, so he included the idea of like piracy as being like an essential staple for economics. Someone could, plunder other people for whatever reason. I don't think that's an option today because we're very anti, at least at the local level, where we don't allow like village raids, right, on other people and stuff like that. So that's not an option for us. Nationally, we might do it, like
Oh, of course.
like governments do it nationally, like pillage oil and stuff like that. Sure, but not at the local level. Aristotle also said hunting and gathering was another way of gaining goods apart from retail. Hunting and gathering. He also included agriculture, hunting and gathering. Um, that's pretty much all of it. So the hunting part, the gathering, you walk around, you gather berries and all this other stuff. So these are all ways of getting goods for your household so you can survive outside of like this other idea of retail where you trade among yourselves, right? Through people making money by not making money, but like you have like a tanner who's really good at working with leather, and you trade your potatoes, let's say, for some I don't know, for some blankets, right? Nice warm blankets. So Aristotle would say that's a separate endeavor altogether. The idea of retail, he would say, let's talk about how you can be self-sustaining first, how you can get goods for your house. And he said agriculture, hunting and gathering, piracy. We even have an example of piracy in the Bible, not like directly, like Abraham when he plundered the kings through saving his brother Lot.
Righteous piracy.
Well, yeah, you could call that righteous piracy. It was like the corollary. It was like a side effect of saving his brother, right? It was a side. He wasn't like trying to be a pirate directly. He was just trying to save his brother, and he made all this cash right at the same time. And not only did he keep it for himself, he also gave a portion, right, to good old Melchizedek, our mysterious
Yes,
friend. So yeah, you have piracy, hunting, fishing, stuff like that, gathering berries, being like a wanderer in that sense, if you wanted to live like a nomad. That's sort of not feasible today either. You can't do that today. So it seems like we're stuck with the idea of agriculture. At the very least, if you're a citizen of a nation or a state, you should at the very least be granted a piece of land so that you can at least be a husbandman, have animals, right? And be able to grow veggies and fruits to sustain yourself and your family if you choose to have one. I probably would add also, because some people might not be able to control themselves. I would say that this land should not be sellable. Like you shouldn't be able to like get rid of it from your name. So it should be stuck with you, and it's not allowed to be sold. So you'd find yourself destitute again, right? You somehow got gambling, got debts, and lost your land. I think that shouldn't be allowed. There should be no way that you can lose your land. It should continue through your family line for generations. Anyway, those are my thoughts, basically.
Well,
On the corollary of work, we sort of entered on a rabbit trail.
no, I don't think so. It's just a matter of, like I said, in an extemporary format, it's hard to keep like great order, and there's merit in some deep preparation of such a substantial topic.
And I think actually the definition on internet goes against Aristotle's. Because what does it say? Any mental or physical activity as a means of earning income. Aristotle would say no. He would say work at the very fundamental level is not retail. It's not getting an income. Work at the very fundamental level is agricultural work, right? You're gaining goods for your house, either through hunting, gathering, or potatoes, or whatever veggies and fruits and animals that you like, milk and stuff like that. So that's a separate thing from earning an income. That's not getting money, right? That's just avoiding the idea of money altogether, and you're just living off the land. You're not using money whatsoever.
Technically, I think you would have.
So you're not employed.
I think, in the sense that unless one would see the money as substitutable by the things that you are growing and harvesting or hunting and gathering, and there's an equivalency there. certainly what you mentioned about the biblical idea about land distribution amongst the 12 tribes of Israel, except for the Levites, who had a special role, who still had some suburbs, it seemed, and belts of land, but they were not, they were strictly devoted to the priesthood as such. And that if you had a squanderer in the family, they couldn't enter into through just a rampant and just undisciplined wasting, then affect others in the family and cause property ownership to actually then be removed from them, whether it is through something such as gambling or through riotous living. There may be some fit in there and some qualification with the Jubilee principle, but at any rate, which needs to be checked, there was that 50th year of release where the stuff, the property would be restored. And within that anyway, there was still that time where a person, anyone who was near of kin, could actually pay the monies that were actually any portion, if that was bought, that could be bought after 10 years, so long as the money was paid back to the purchaser, and they could be redeemed at any time. So strong family units, there's a corollary. The responsibility and the co-functioning of the fundamental units of society. The family first, not the government, and the family first, not the church either, or any sort of social organisation or religious organisation. We are talking about the family. And the Bible beautifully, again, superiority of teachings we have here. It's the idea of, we come in the world on an equal type of basis, and we ought to have an equitable distribution of land because it is God's land, not ours. Now, as far as the idea, interestingly, of piracy, and it's somewhat ironic, we are living in a country, as indeed many of the Western countries, especially the younger, we could say, colonies, are basically are the benefactors of outright robbery, highway robbery, the same, tantamount to piracy. We see in the USA, of course, just theft from the Indians. They were in a way, we'll just come over and with superior power, take your property. Same happened here, of course, in Australia, a lesser extent, maybe in somewhere like New Zealand with the Maoris. But here, of course, the population were basically treated abominably, and their property was stolen. And the essential history of Australia, just to digress a little bit, is really that. It's not a whole lot of boring stuff about who came on what ship and who did what and what they did on in their wars and their contributions and their social growth. It's essentially that good old Mother England was getting a bit sort of choked, and the powers there, we're talking about government, Masonic type of powers, they thought, like, yeah, we've got the technology to go this place called Australia, and these people went and they carved up the land between themselves. Basically, that's your real history of Australia, and
right. Just keep going. I'm going to grab some snacks.
People. So basically, we are, I, who am the son of European immigrants in the wartime, born here, am in this country called Australia. And incidentally, if you want to search out this matter, you might have a look at the scriptures, which could amaze you on topics like this, that this actual land is mentioned, and it is clearly biblical Kavalar, the land of bdellium, which is opal, and onyx, which is chrysoprase, or chrysoprase jade, if you talk about that type of substance. So this land is recognised, land covered with water and with a people that are named in the Bible also. But that's for another day. So we come here then, and we are immediately slaves to these people. I don't want to sound too radical here, it is simply the truth, who own these belts of land, whether it's the government that owns them or whether the government plus its friends who own great big belts of it, who got their monies often like on the back of other people's labour and slave labour, we can say. Another thing the good old Mother England and the USA is famous for, that horrible epoch in their history, or episode called the slave trade, which shows their care for their fellow human. But so we're in this land, and basically you are stuck. You don't have a place where you can stay. You don't have any security. So what do you have to do? Well, there's a system called banks, and there's jobs that are provided, and the government can hold you a little bit in its clutches. It can stop you from moving around to let's say, it can hinder you with regard to business, stop your movement, make various laws as they please, and they will set up the factories. And this type of, unless you're very talented and can find something which has a market for it, you are stuck with having to work in the labour places which the government and its wealthy aristocratic friends provide for you. You cannot work on your own land because you don't own anything. Very few own anything. So anyone that comes and migrates, or anyone that was poor to begin with, has to find work to survive. You have got your balls to the wall in that scenario. And like I said, unless you have the talent and the market for your talent to earn something better, you're stuck with these jobs. So this is a scenario we're living. It's an unbiblical type of scenario. We're living on stolen property. The US is also living on stolen property. A nation that was strengthened by the Africans, kidnapped from their country. And this is contrary to the biblical model. In the 1,000-year kingdom of Jesus Christ prophesied in the Bible, I wonder how these sorts of things will be changed. But you see, there's inequality. There's tribes, and each member of the tribe, you had your plot. And even if there was some squandering, a strong family unit could reclaim that land. I mean, it would be quite easy, really. Your members of your kin could just even contribute a bit of money each and buy that back if they so choose. Any rate that went back in the Jubilee. So,
yeah, there were pretty strong land protections in the Old Testament, right?
So we've got a society, again, if we just extrapolate that into the family somewhat, we've got that kibbutz, community. Now, with some of these people, there is that we mentioned about those who said, oh, look, why don't we get together and start a commune? We realise, of course, there are problems here. One of those, of course, is that there's the person who's become very much a loner. They are troubled, or if they're not troubled, they could be they could be a contented loner. Although I doubt that anyone really likes loneliness as much as they would not care to admit it.
What's it? The writer of Proverbs said, "The man who isolates himself is a fool," or something in Proverbs. Something like that.
An example like the demoniac in the wilderness. There he is. People are too frightened to go near him. He's by himself. Now he's tormented.
And yet there's a legion in him. So he's not by himself.
He's got company. Oh, great! It's like being in like a jail, and you're in the same cell as I don't know, the worst sodomites in history.
You don't want, in other words.
That's right, exactly right. So to make it worse. But the idea that somehow he's alone, this bloke, and it's interesting that he had that desire to be with Jesus Christ, and what did Jesus tell him? Go back to your family. Was at the crux of that. Witness to them, be a testimony, but go back. Same with the prodigal son. So we have a problem in saying, we'd like to all get in a commune. It's really got to be such a commune, well, one could say, that has a grand social, has grand, strong moral and legal constraints about it. Well, like the laws in Israel. Because otherwise you could get some half-wit that starts to dominate, some dark-glass cult leader.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, hell is breaking loose in that very commune.
It will be interesting. Like, I did come across in the NEET forum a website called NEETpride, and this guy advocates like a model for how you would live together in one house with a group of guys. You would set up like a contract, and one person would be like the head, and he would have to be the dictator of the house. You couldn't have it any other way. You couldn't have a democracy, in other words, he thinks, right? It'd have to be like a dictatorship rule where, you have the basic ideas of like the rules of when you enter into it. I might be messing up some of his ideas. I'll print it out for you later and you read it, and we might talk about it in the next discussion. Because that'd be a good interaction point, That'd be pretty interesting to see your thoughts on that. But I'm sort of roughly giving it. Like, it sounded like he was saying it's a dictatorship rule. Democracy ultimately would not work because the nature of a lease for a household is not one person. You can have a shared lease, but he thinks the best model is to have one person on the lease with the ultimate power to kick anyone out, right? And you have just basic agreements among each other of what your duties are in this residence. What are your ideas on like that?
Good luck. I mean, the reason.
Maybe human nature is so rotten that it never.
Exactly right. That's why the kibbutz model, a greatly developed model under a tremendous set of laws, albeit watered down, corrupted, and warped by various intermediary bodies that functioned as legislators and legal systems, like, for example, Pharisees and Sadducees. Totally warped the meaning because they didn't have the light to understand what those scriptures meant. But at any rate, you're thinking here, well, so that sort of model, because human nature being as it is, you're going to get something similar, maybe a bit of a weak example, like church splits, where you've got a small body of people often, let's say 100 people, and they're all happy as Larry and big old loving family. And then something comes in something transpires that where there is conflict, it could be in the church setting of a doctrine, or it could be somebody did somebody wrong, or it could be one woman married that guy, not that guy. And so you get conflicts, you get side taking. It's people who have then, say, a limited type of fellowship with each other, but they don't really help each other out. It's not a family anymore. And then, of course, then they split, and then those who might have contributed, let's say materially, let's say they bought some property, they might want that back, or they want some damages. It's similar with this example. You're going to get a dictator. Well, what's he going to do? Without any, if he's able to, that is, he's going to get the military arm of the village under his control. I mean, you'd be stupid not to. I mean, what type of model are we advocating here? We're advocating something like a commune, but with a strong, in a country where there is a strong military and a strong police force.
I don't think you have enough info. Like, I'll print out for you later. You can read it for yourself if you're interested to interact with the idea.
But we can see that people being what they are, it is still very hard to trust anybody. How sad it is even when we see that as the case amongst those who are professing to be Christians. But study into human nature and into history will tell you that, and just your own observation, or to make a person more wary about their fellow man at anything. Of course, you should be their fellow human. Of course, you should be wary of yourself, because you may be prone to these things too, and not guiltless, prone to ripping people off if you have the power, prone to immorality that often happens in these various sort of, whatever we want to call as a commune. What was that series? Was there a series, Heaven on Earth, I think? That's worth a watch on those topics. But at any rate, we're looking for a social system that helps people at the moment. But if you've got your own plot, and you can kind of have some autonomy there, you can still work within the broader concept of like family plots would be closer to you, tribal friends closer to you, and then out further in like to broader and broader concepts of your kin, so the tribes, other tribes, to the nation.
This sort of intersects with Aristotle's definition of politics as being an association of households. So you have the households, every household has a family unit, right? They have their own land, they do these activities, whether it be hunting, gathering, whether it be agriculture, and they loosely associate themselves like in a village, right? Setting. They have like-minded principles, and they probably start doing some sort of retail. You know, the blacksmith trades with the shoemaker, and all these skills, you know, contribute to flourishing.
Absolutely, and this leads to another definitely connected corollary, but it's certainly connected, and essentially so, I think. The symbiotic functioning of the people. Let's say they've got a bit of autonomy, they've got that sense of security, and we could translate it even, let's say, into an urban setting where there's a directive where governments, instead of spending money on a lot of parasitic things, were able to devote maybe that. Now, this might be somewhat wishful in the way things are at the moment, but let's say that people were able to have like some sort of house and a plot of land.
Yeah. This is probably a good time to mention one of the topics we pulled out of our hat was recommendations of people to read and lectures and stuff like that. I would recommend right now. People read Aristotle's Politics, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and also on the subject we talked about, the Old Testament in regards to land laws, for what we've been talking about. I forget what the references exactly are for that. Probably not Leviticus.
Numbers.
A bit of Numbers and the book of Numbers.
You look under some like keywords in the concordance, Bible concordance, you'll find the passages pretty easily.
Yeah. So just do like use your basic Bible tools, concordances. You guys can do a search for that. But yeah, if you have any other ideas or recommendations for what we've been talking about.
And not as far as authors as such. I don't think that there's a whole lot maybe that approach things from a biblical perspective. Nonetheless, hey, governments of the world, you're welcome to borrow our ideas. They're for free. So, but what you just recently stated with this idea of the bartering and trading is this idea of like gifts, development of gifts, and you have something that I can profit from. That person has something that we can mutually profit from each other. So this means that we've got like some deeper concepts here and spiritual concepts of ideas of, for example, gifts and abilities. Now, one of the problems with those in the lower paying job is that the society is not ordered to cater for their gifts at all. First of all, it's extremely technological, isn't it? And you're going to get, and it's also highly international. You don't need to go to somebody with the ability to craft a nice shoe or a coat. Right. It's all coming from China now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's retail now. Everything's all those things are retail. So, sorry.
But this idea of gifts,
it's industrial, I should say. It's industrialized.
I mean,
rather than being professionalized by an individual. Like, oh, I know that my neighbor across the street, he's an excellent shoemaker. Mm-hmm. It's not like that. Now it's like, well, I buy Nikes, imported from China, right? That's the industrial model of goods, right? Whereas your traditional model was profession-based. It was, well, this guy's trustworthy. I know him. I shake hands with him. You know, I met his family the other day at church or whatever. You can buy shoes from him. It's great, right? It's impossible now to do that.
Yeah, some of these I suppose, trades are becoming even obsolete due to the availability of mass-produced stuff, often with and in factories which are extremely automated. But this idea of gifts and abilities, talents. Now, I agree with those who say that it seems that everybody has some type of useful gift that God has given and is capable of generating income, or if not, directly providing, say, income per se, that it is useful. Now, this gets to a deep idea of work. Jesus says, he will come and reward everybody according to their work. We could say that there's a lot of people that say they go to work and really they have an occupation or a job. There are many arms of society. There's many professions that we could say are fundamentally parasitic or horribly overpaid, such as legal professions. They are absolutely atrocious. We see that there's matters which could be decided in 1 minute by Solomon, and 10 minutes by Aristotle, and 45 minutes by myself, that take on years and years and years. This idea of these relativistic morals, the things have to be presented and processed. So we've got what I'm saying is we've got a drain. And people say, oh yes, I go and I work hard as a lawyer or a judge. But what are you doing? You are working iniquity. Aside from the very few that maybe are not riddled with covetousness, that will do a lot of legal aid and actually try to achieve a righteous solution.
Yeah,
amidst
there's a couple of
morass.
Problems that just sort of come all at once. What you said. On the one hand, there's the problem of time. It takes years to solve problems, legally, right? For some people. On the other hand, there's the problem of justice of money, right? They're charging an inordinate amounts of money. So, you have this. It seems like there's a problem that happens. You said God gives people gifts, right? So there's the idea of specialization, and specialization seems to be like a necessary requirement when you're talking about gifts. Oh, this guy has a gift of the gab. He can talk. Maybe he'd be a good lawyer, right? So you have this idea, okay, he has to specialize. He chose to be a lawyer, let's say. He wants to defend people in a court of law, right? Now that guy obviously has a choice of how much he charges, right? He doesn't have to charge a crazy amount of money, right? So that's the one issue. The other one, but the time seems to be a constraint on resources. And so, like you said, you could solve the problem in 45 minutes, right? Aristotle could solve it in who knows how long and whatever, right? And why does it take years? Maybe it is the problem of specialization and learning that specialty. How many years does it take to get a law degree? And because of that requirement, because of the guild says you must spend X amount of years, right, before we will allow you to stand in a court of law, right? Therefore, not many people even get involved in wanting to be a judge, wanting to be a lawyer, and therefore there are not many representatives, and there are not many places. Oh, places is another problem. Why do you have to have a courtroom, a special building to go to, right? Maybe there's not enough buildings, right? And that's why it takes so long, because there's only like 3 buildings in the city to do all of your courtroom stuff in, right? So you have these problems of time, problems of money, problems of specialization all come at once and seem to have to be dealt with, one at a time.
My main point in this regard was in developing this idea of light work was simply to say that there are a lot of things that are called professions. Some are given great honour, but when you analyse them, they are detrimental to society. Like I mentioned, the type of courts that we possess in the Western world, but not only the Western world. This is in these secular courts. They don't know what to decide. You get contradictory results. The judges have to be informed, don't know what they're talking about, and laws, instead of being made and already there from the scripture, they are continually made and interpreted. But that's only part of the problem. It's still a deeper problem. Because even with the scripture there, corrupt people can still, although they will make themselves look foolish, but they will twist the laws, and they will blaspheme the Lord, as the Sadducees and Pharisees indeed did, whether that is by having a body of tradition or simply horrendous misinterpreting. Well, what I'm saying here is that we have in our societies just many things that are not actually productive for the country. Like we have monstrously top-heavy administration. Well, consider, for example, those in Parliament, where they are having their endless and childish debates. They're getting paid well, and most of the time they are raving. The policies that they are bringing up are not like in line with biblical model. Here's an example. We seek what a government might like to do. We see, for example, remember when King David was preparing the temple, he gathered the people.
Are you advocating monarchy?
I'm advocating a type of governmental involvement, but short of communism. I don't know even if you could call it a type of socialism, where the government sees itself as responsible to create a market. That means freeing up land. That means giving access to water. To the waters, to the hunting grounds. You know that a lot of people who wanted to hunt and gather or fish are restrained from doing that. They're hindered legally. Freeing up vacant farmland, building cities. You could get people that are not employed, and I'm just talking about the people who nonetheless will be getting something from the government, but they should be smart enough to be working that at a profit to themselves. Finding the people who are best suited to something, whether it's a governmental fishing fleet, government agricultural, government mine, make sure the health and safety is looked after, pay the money and turn it to a profit. Just expand. But people are rotting, and their choice. If people say, "Oh, it's up to you and it's your choice," well, please look at the options. If your options are like so constricted, what are your choices?
Yeah.
Now, even in that scenario, there's those who would argue, well, nonetheless, a spiritual person ought to have the strength of character that within moral confines, they're not doing anything corrupt, handle doing hard work and even like dangerous work and so forth, that there is that to consider. There are...
Yeah, I think if you want to earn a wage, you can have that freedom, but you should also have the freedom of just, as a base, having your own plot of land and choosing agriculture or whatever, right? So there should be a couple of options there. Like you said, like what
Yes.
choice do you have? At the end of the day, if you're in suburbia, well, you can't grow veggies and live. Like you have to go to work or you have to live off of some sort of social net, like what people in my group like to call NEET bucks, which would be for us Centrelink, right? In Australia, they call it NEET bucks internationally. And so there's other ways. Like I would happily get off of NEET bucks if I had my own land. I would do agriculture, animal husbandry. I'd look after myself, and I would say, get lost, government, right? That's what I would do personally. But I don't have that option. The only way for me to get that would be to work, let's say, the next 15 years, more than 40 hours a week, maybe 50 hours a week, and I might be lucky to have a plot of land at the end of that 15 years where I could do agriculture. So, like you said, the question is, what are the options, right?
I mean, even a person that has their own home, they can rent out a couple of rooms and they don't have to get any governmental assistance, right? They've got enough to live. The actual owning of your own home is a horrendous burden of itself. And I encourage people out there, not with covetous motives, but don't play the prodigal. God set up the family unit for many purposes.
A lot of people aren't familiar with biblical lingo, so explain a prodigal in the biblical sense.
Yes, a prodigal is a son or a daughter who runs away from the family protective unit. We're, of course, assuming that the family is positive here. Often today, though, it's done out of rebellion. It's because, I want to go my way, I want to go out. That's pretty much what the prodigal son in the Bible, if you'd like to search out our references, in Luke chapter 15 or 16. But it's that example that, like the lad was really tempted with the trappings of the world, and maybe he wasn't really happy he found the family life boring. He wanted his so-called freedom. Maybe he wanted to meet females, and he wanted to have a good time. And he didn't want anybody censuring him. its face and ear with moral discourses. So I encourage them that people, please, we see, look at the Greeks in Australia, love them or dislike them. Look how they acquired great property, strong family units. They got together with the uncles and the cousins and so forth. They provided money. They bought property, good property, and they sold it at a profit later on. But this is from strong family units, you see. We see a breakdown in the Australian family unit. Was not such a problem with the older Australian, but the modern Australian, the Anglo-Celtic type of unit, and to some extent even creeping now more into the Italian and the Greek, although they are powerfully family oriented. So what I'm saying is that in a family you can pool money and go in like sort of collective projects. You can learn trades from somebody in your family. They're usually big enough that somebody has something that you ought have the patience to learn, that you ought, if you don't like it or seemingly hopeless at it, you ought to maybe accept there, again, another magnificent biblical principle of the seeming, like I could say, like it's very, the illustrative evidence is such that you could just about call it a requirement of the Apostle Paul. No greater mind ever lived except for the Lord. I think that safely can be said. Awesome intellect. What was he? A tent maker, you see. And you had prophets who were herdsmen. David, king of Israel, was originally like a shepherd, humble beginnings, but you could do something. And there's other, and of course, the Lord Jesus Christ, carpenter. You see, it's these real trades. These things really do contribute. I know it's okay like to have a priesthood which was dedicated, but our lawyers and our judges can hardly be called that. Like I said, they what's that?
That's right.
I just thought something was playing up. We need to have that strong family unit, and then a broader family unit, we could say, like with the church. People in the church provide jobs for others, you see. Somebody in the church that's completed an apprenticeship and now is out on their own could employ somebody in the church now as an apprentice. It's that sort of family thing. You've got to, in that sense, to live with people. Now,
yeah. I think this is actually a point to bring up. I don't know about each individual situation, but in the NEET community, people that are suffering and struggling through this, period of laying down and rotting, losing a lot of time, not doing anything in their life and stuff like that, I would encourage them to seek out a local church, because a lot of the time you'll discover that there are a lot of helpful people, even if they might be doctrinally questionable. You will find a lot of social help from these places. So I guess I would encourage them to at least try to seek out a local church to help them get out and do something productive.
look, as a general rule, again, this is awkward because, again, there's corruption in the churches, but a lot less than that's out there in the world. You still have to be wary of people. I tend to be more suspicious of people than trusting, but nonetheless, to be around people that are on the whole have things that are sort of a righteous character standard that is evident amongst the people, it's observable. They could do that. Or some would argue just any other strong community which functions as a broader family.
Yeah, a lot of these people lack a close family net. A lot of the time, I think, from what I've read, they feel isolated. even though they're being supported by their parents, they're looked at as scum because they're just rotting in their bedroom.
Yes.
And so this idea of family is important. We're social animals. No man is an island. We're designed to be in groups. So I think that they might find some sort of a connection in a local church. It might not happen, but because I don't know each individual's situation, but I know a majority of my listeners are from the U.S., so I think it wouldn't be that hard to find a local church in your area.
I mean, even given that a person ought to seriously consider the claims of God on their life and the ancient book that's been provided and compare the other so-called ancient books. A person ought to investigate that anyway, where you're going to do that. Of course, you can do it yourself, and you can study these doctrines from the scripture that have been mentioned. So we see that a person should have that type of duty, but I'd like to mention just another resource was that chappie on the that we saw. He talked a lot about psychology and willpower.
That guy.
I remember he mentioned
Self-Wire. That's the YouTube channel.
He's got a name and he's got a PhD or something. Was it?
Yeah, in psychology. Yeah, a Christian that had a PhD in psychology combined with theology. Yeah, I think the channel is called Self-Wire. He has a lot of interesting content on the human condition and understanding yourself emotionally, psychologically, with mixed in with like a biblical understanding too. So he tries to integrate modern psychology with biblical ethics and a biblical understanding of the self.
Well, pertinently, he mentioned, I think, maybe amongst some other things, but prominently we had he mentioned the social isolation as being a terrible, terrible problem, loneliness, and the other one was unemployment. But we can develop this idea again of unemployment and employment. Further again, link there is like, well, wages as regarding people in a society, getting wages and contributing whatever you get from society or from you get for your work, you are giving also, so that you are not being a drain and getting, because you can have a job, like I said, many of the administrative bodies in our society fundamentally useless, doing nothing profitable. The things that need to be done that could be done properly and by somebody who had the actual wisdom to do it, but we don't have great wisdom in these countries now, do we? But at any rate, this concept of like social isolation. So Alex will probably like give further detail on that chappie, who's excellent on many levels to listen to. For example, the dichotomy between human willpower and faith in God. What am I obliged to do, and what God sees, what God binds somewhat Himself to do on your behalf, which has always been an interesting dichotomy. But anyway, branching out from that, I was thinking of even like the government projects which are actually useful. Many of these so-called like work for benefit projects are garbage. They get people doing things that the mentally retarded people do. So they don't know how to discern, develop, or deploy gifts that people have.
Yeah, I can give examples because I was part of these projects. Several examples I could give. Was working at if you call it work, at a church. I was pretty much just sitting around and doing nothing for most of the time. We were waiting for materials to be delivered so we could do upgrades on the church, whether it be repairing walkways like cement, um, giving a new coat of paint to doors, stuff like this. These sort of projects would have been okay to do had they been done efficiently, but we were just literally there, listening to the radio. I would take a book in and just read a book. Literally, I would just sit there all day reading a book because the supervisor knew that he didn't have the materials to do the work. And when someone would show up to check up on us, we would pretend that we're busy. We would grab like a broom, run outside, and sweep up like spotless areas because there's nothing else to do. It had already been done. We'd water gardens, all this other useless stuff. Yeah, so that's one example. Another example would be like the Salvation Army sorting clothes in the back rooms. Just maintaining this store locally where they sell like clothes, they sell old furniture, they sell books, some electronics. So again, these sort of tasks have their use. Yeah, it's good for people of low income to have the opportunity to be able to purchase these items at a discount secondhand. Nonetheless, I don't see any other initiatives as an option. Another thing that I did was work at a Hindu temple. Now, for me, this was great because it was an opportunity to share ideas of God with a pagan organization. I thought this was awesome. But at a practical level, again, yeah, okay, religion does have a positive effect on society as a whole. You know, people that are part of religions are kind of, have a basic morality greater than your average secularist, sure. But again, like, are these things really great options? Either spending 6 months to do literally 2 weeks worth of work at a church. It could have been done in 2 weeks, and we spent 6 months there.
So,
or spending your time sorting clothes in a Salvation Army shop. Again, those things are, useful for low-income people, I agree. Or spending your time at a Hindu temple for the 6 months, helping pagans progress. These don't seem like great options. As my friend was talking about, there should be like some useful options as far as work, as contributing to society goes. So, yeah, those are just some examples of my experience of being in NEET, being like told to go places and work.
I recall George Foreman, the famous world champion boxer, in his day as a youth, with some crimes behind him. I believe he went into something like was it a government initiative or a government/Christian initiative of some work corps. And he learned to do building, so I would say like, bricklaying, stone masonry, footings, probably solid plastering, and carpentry. Useful stuff. You could branch that out somewhere, let's say, that would have agricultural emphasis, mining, fishing, like basically quarrying, lumberjacking, these sorts of things, or transport people. But you really need a zealous, caring type of government that has vision and can organise. Not as just a bunch of like lily-livered, weak, anemic folks who have done courses at university called politics and think they can run a country. Give me a break. And the ignorant citizens, they seem to not care because they're concentrating and distracted with bread and circuses, or worried about how the hell they're going to survive on that and pay the rent on that rotten old low paying job that they wake up every morning and hate and even dread, and pray that they'll be one day delivered from it somehow. But at any rate, so we have George Foreman there with this thing, and George Foreman then develops into a great boxer, a great athlete, and he becomes also a great inventor and a Christian pastor. So we have like this proper allocation of like good programs. Like I alluded to before with King David, you have some sort of social programs where the government uses the resources, doesn't rob people of their private resources, well, unless they were given monstrous private resources they didn't deserve anyway, seriously, like some of these holdings that people have, goodness knows how they can own so much. But we'll leave that for the moment. But just sort of some constructive programs. Maybe we could look to the often powerfully religiously and reformer, Christian reformer-based Swiss canton type of structure for guidance, the way they do stuff. And of course, we have to, and this is somewhat, well, I wouldn't use the term monumental, but this is a very difficult issue to negotiate, is how to transport those sorts of principles. Even the land owning, we said, well, we could sort of like have folks just like with basic apartments that they could actually like dwell in, so that maybe they could save a bit of money instead of like their money being soaked up in rent and they can't save for a house. Of course, these children should, most children, and where your parents are reasonably fair, should be staying at home and saving their money, and also doing various family duties. So there was that example. And then we're getting into this whole idea, though. There's a deep psychological need in amongst all of this. Okay, let's say we've got talents and we've got things we are able to do. What about just our own problem and ingrained problem now? Partly our own fault, partly the oppressive circumstances. And I'll say that here we can talk about depression for a little while. Not long, that's worthy of a topic, all of its long series of discussions all its own. But where you are prepared for work, where you are ready for work, where your body hasn't become an insipid mass and you can barely do 15 minutes of work, where it doesn't become a horrible chore, where you are looking at your watch continuously and screaming for the end of the day, where your mind is alert and you are processing information, learning quickly, showing initiative. This is a very big issue because a lot of people, and I'm not saying it's totally your own fault, we have to own that many things are self-inflicted, but many things are our own evil, meaning that many things are self-inflicted indeed, due to our own evil habits, whether that is drugs, whether that is excess food, whether that's alcohol, whether that's watching garbage on TV or listening to various types of music, on and on and on. Whether it is not doing any type of rigorous, worthwhile exercise. Whether it's spending time talking rubbish with friends and not instead of developing your mind, all these sorts of things. Whether it's not concentrating at your school and putting some effort in, these sorts of things, self-inflicted. Apart from that, there can be, though, from just the various issues in life, and of course we've got those people that had some sort of impairment, that where it is something really, you could say, the cup of God, I'd like to call it, or sorrow that it seems to have been given to you. So you're feeling lonely, you've had a tragedy in your life, you can barely wake up in the morning, you feel these sorts of torments, you've got no love in your life, you've got no pleasure in your life. What are you going to do there? You've got very little money, and you're struggling even if you have enough, and it's always there, seems to be hand to mouth, as it were. Okay, what ought you try to do there? Or you feel like you're bursting with talent and you're getting depressed and very, very bored because you're struggling to find things to keep you interested and things to do. What should you do there? Well, faith in God helps greatly. Here you've got to recognise God as sovereign. All right? You all must be very careful not to become bitter against God and rail against God. Here you've got to accept the situation as it is. All right? I'm a man myself. I think I understand what loneliness is. I think I understand what frustrations are and anxiety. And I think I understand what torment is. But what are you going to do? If you've got no hope and no faith in God and no interest, you've got no direction whatsoever. That's a bad way to be. That is a completely meaningless way to be. You feel that you have no purpose. All right, and I'll try even now to talk to the atheist, as it were, as well, because I do want to help people. I do feel pity. You've got to then look to deal with the things that you can control. Any things of those self-inflicted matters need to be changed. If you are impaired, you need to try to do what you can. The Bible says, whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. If you are really disabled in a wheelchair, then I'm thinking you have to develop your intellect in your mind, and you have to, like, maybe, if need be, get rid of the television set. Be careful of listening to too much music, whatever type of music it is, but you seem to be spending so much time hoping that there is going to be some sort of panacea for your loneliness and your frustration. If you're able-bodied, I suggest that you definitely try to get the habits into yourself that make you strong and sturdy. You ought to be looking to getting your body fit. You can go on some very interesting journeys. You can go into the world of martial arts. You can study the books, and you can do the training. Even you can teach yourself a lot of stuff. You need to keep fit, and you need to get rid of those habits which are detrimental. Like I said, television. I don't own a television. Fortunately, I also feel free from the power of heavy rock music, which I listen to a great extent, and wasted a lot of time. You've got to actually preparation. You've got to deal with those bad habits, and you've got to cultivate good ones. If you are looking, and if you are praying to some type of deity and looking for help, seek the true deity. And this deity is sovereign. Not a hair of your head shall fall to the ground without your Heavenly Father knowing about it.
I think this is a good segue for the uniqueness of Christ. Enter into this topic. We were agreeing to talk about this, so let's segue into that now. As you started talking about praying to a deity.
You want to go there now?
I just thought that's a good segue. Like, that's a good idea to just slide into, isn't it? Like, it's a good time to slide into that now. You started talking about praying to a deity. The uniqueness of Christ is a good reason that you should be praying to this one, not anyone else.
Yes. This one is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. You might not feel, look, the lot of humanity can be terribly hard. It is really hard for everybody, but extremely hard for some, is it not? So, you can look at your afflictions, and your afflictions may be, like I said, very severe, and it may be strongly in the direction of God's cut. But I just want to maybe just give a short conclusion for now to this is please look to dealing with your own rotten habits and be honest with yourself and judge yourself and just start to do positive things. Just try. I know there's that sense of being bound, but there's one who does unbind and requires honesty from you. This is the segue, the true God who helps. Because even if you are able to give up alcohol and says, I didn't do it through religion, what you must nevertheless realise that there's still God's grace there, and God helped you anyway. You don't understand that really, if God would leave us alone and let our sins and our bad habits completely overwhelm us, we'd be all done for. Basically, God saves, God delivers. So the singularity of Jesus Christ, this is the means by which God delivers people in truth. You can get maybe some false types of deliverances where it's simply because something nice has happened to you in your life, you have a good job, you have a lovely partner, and you're happy. But the strength of character that you need to get over the hopelessness, to give you the strength for the day, you see, this is something that you need to seek the true God for. You only need to consider the life of Jesus Christ if we wish to compare sufferings. It's that chapter in Isaiah 53. If you read that closely, you'll see that the Lord Jesus Christ had a life of great agony. He was not popular, he was not handsome by our standards. He was a man, also the eternal God, or one of the three persons in the eternal being, who lived a life of tremendous affliction. If you read Isaiah 53, taking upon himself our infirmities, the 40-day fast in the wilderness, the loneliness, the rejection by his people. This was one who was incredibly sturdy, all the great lengthy prayers, the suffering of such an ilk, so pressed was his body, so pressed was he in his humanity, that he sweated great drops of blood. This comes from incredible suffering. Now this is the one we need to look for. This is the one we need to deal with. This is God's provision for the human race. What did God require? Not your works. Look at yourself. Look at yourself. Look at myself. Your life has been how? What's it characterized by? You're no different from me. There may be some who look like they live somewhat righteous lives, not by God's standard. People are capable. If people kept living and living and were reincarnated, they would get tested in such a way and were subject to all tests, they would end up failing and they would do something atrocious, for sure. So,
we also break our own standards. People that don't think there are any standards other than their own. Surely you've made standards for yourself and you've realized, wait a minute, I just broke my own standard. That's evidence of your fallen nature. Scripture talks about this. That's one evidence apart from the law of God, where you can see you are a lawbreaker even by your own standard. You break your own laws. So, add that to the list.
yes, we say, oh, we have no standards, but we like to get treated certain ways, don't we? That's standards. Applying to ourselves. An obvious point, really. So, God's not going to accept your works. God won't accept the works of anybody. There was only one who had the impeccable life without sin, without transgressing any of God's laws, precepts or principles. That is an offering on your behalf. And righteously so too, because this is the eternal God who came as a man. It makes sense, really. Great doctrine. What works are you're going to bring to God? Just what? How are you, corrupted, going to suddenly start bringing forth lovely fruits pleasing to God? And really, what does that tell you about yourself? It shows that you can't change yourself, that you need to be changed from a power external to yourself. Why? You have done wrong things already. You will continue to do wrong things. There are diseases in you. Somebody's got to deal with the disease and all its forms. The disease is sin. The various forms are all the character transgressions against a holy God. So really, you've got to really try to deal with a just and holy God and consider the merits of Christianity. Consider the person. Consider the message. Look at the great wisdom, the great words that this one spoke. Look at the great life. Look at the miracles. Look at the great laws of the book, which this unusual one verified. The great laws. Just the great teachings. Can you find anything in any other books that has any similarity? You cannot. Because the other books are full of self-contradictory, incoherent, worthless ravings. Not so the Scripture. So you need you need to look for a proper solution to your problems. If you want to go onto a journey into fitness and sort yourself out and say, once I was an alcoholic and I got extremely fit, look, that has some cause and effect help. That's actually not going to really change your moral fibre. You'll feel better, you'll become more functional. Hey, if you just want that, if you are that person that is feeling in a terrible rut and you just start doing stuff and keep on with it and show discipline. But that's not going to make you truly fulfilled. You're always going to feel like you're set on edge trying to keep up to a standard. You have to, you must. And I'm not denying the need for discipline even for the Christian, but it's something that ought not be a horrible burden. When we have lived lives that have been full of bad habits ourselves, it's hard for the leopard to change his spots. You need somebody to change the leopard, if that makes any sense. I didn't really think it through. That's how it is.
There is concepts like that in like games, the idea of changing forms, so people understand.
You've got to be changed. So, how do we try and have a sacred message and then have a secularized one for people? And I think most folks, the great majority, have been in these sorts of places, but maybe not for an extended time.
Oh, there are a lot of people that have been for years, like laying down and rotting. I've read reports of people confessing, not being able to get out of this.
It's a common thing that the classic, you can't get up out of bed in the morning. You wake up and you think, I don't want to go through the same old horrible stuff I went through yesterday. It's going to be boring. It's torture. And, you can get, and there's numerous accounts, great athletes who have these experiences. Hey, they were extremely fit. So, and they have basically had, whether it's some emotional rupture, or they've had some physical injury, or they've lost money somehow, they have ended up with that type of depression. When the hard times come, what you gonna do? I mean, if you're struggling, I'm not saying, I know some have what can be termed a bit of a green tree scenario, and you're in the dry wasteland. Nonetheless, you have to not rail and blaspheme against God, but you have to accept and look to just strengthening in that scenario. Joseph, I remember reading Joseph, the 12 years he spent in the Egyptian prison. I think in one of the Psalms it says, the iron entered into his soul. There was a period of time where Joseph was incredibly afflicted. And then God turned it around. So you've got to be looking also like God to turn things around for you. This real living God. You might feel God that God does nothing for you, that God doesn't help. And it may indeed seem so. But you've got to rise above that and see that although the tests humans have are very severe, God does care. And that he's often doing these things to develop us in a positive way, and so that an award can be accrued to our account. So that basically you can say that there is a sense of worth there. All right. So we're talking about the singularity of Jesus Christ. You you can compare Jesus Christ to all others, really, who comes close. If you bother to read the scripture, everything he says is a wait for moment. It's just, you are just, every utterance there is awesome. All the parables, all the slabs of wisdom, it's majestic. And really, how dare people compare anyone else to this one? And here I'd like to make a comment about, does one need to believe in that Jesus was historical? I mean, could you say, oh, look, I find that's a good doctrine, and so forth? I'd like to rebut that. What group of men or what people could possibly contrive an account like that? How could you make that? How could humans make that person up with those words?
I mean, yeah, if you think about it, it's not something that we want, right? If you think of if it's a human construction, what we would construct for ourselves would be an easy way, would be a figure that panders to our desires, like the Greek gods, right? Case in point would be the gods of Greece. They were like mere men, except with great powers. But Jesus was not so. He was like no one else. He was above human nature in righteousness and justice. So if it was a human construction, it's unparalleled. There's nothing in history that's like it.
You're going to get humans that themselves are nothing like him, that somehow coming together they're able to construct a Jesus and that was not historical. Oh.
Yeah, it's also not mainstream history. If you go to a university department, you'll have an acknowledgement. They'll say, yeah, Jesus was a person who died on the cross. That'll be a basic historical fact. The Romans killed him. No one's going to deny that. Only your very fringe historian will deny that. This is the majority position. Of course, they're not going to accept all the doctrines of Christianity, but they'll grant you Christ existing. They'll grant you that he died on a cross, killed by Romans. These are basic historical facts. Now, as far as the uniqueness of Christ, this is our basic discussion. I would say yes, again, pointing to a person as being a sacrifice for our sins. I mean, I don't see any example in history of any sort of claim like this, ever. This is a unique case in point, that he would have the power to strike away legally the guilt that lies between us and the maker of the universe. Throughout history, people have been sacrificing animals over and over again, day in, day out, to absolve themselves of something towards the deities they perceived. And here is one in history, a human, who claimed that he was coming to annul this breach between the divine and the human, this guilt, this shame created by Adam, let's say. Started with Adam, let's say, and continued on through his progeny. Clearly, through murders, through rapes, through thefts, all the commandments we've breached are evidences that we've done this. And so he's annulled that legally with the Father. Nobody else has claimed to do this. And I think this is also an argument that he is unique in history.
The sheer doctrine itself of somebody that was to die for in your place, and take the guilt upon themselves and the punishment that you deserve so that you could be set free. Basically satisfying, you could say, the one who has the right to and will judge you, your creator and judge. Conceptually incredible, as indeed is the resurrection. And also the testimony of changed lives. This works. When I say there's powerful evidence this works, here I'd like to put the listener maybe onto the resource of of David Wood. You're talking about like this purging of the guilt, the setting of the freedom, the sense of freedom.
Changing of behavior in a very deep sense.
Yes.
Being like a sociopath transformed into a family man who has kids and a wife.
And an all-round pleasant, great guy.
Someone who was in jail.
And did a terrible thing and had a terrible nature. So he had misery in jail, had a miserable life, but also like as we could say, a psychopathic type of life. But you need power. I mean, what are you? This is tied in with this whole thing. This Lord is to say, this God, this true God, our Creator. This is a God of great power to transform your life. This is the whole idea. This sense that a very real sense in your being that you're being delivered, and you can skirt around the bush, like we were saying, beat around the bush with many things, and you can have a couple of things nice happen to you. Like you might get a nice job with lots of money. You might meet the partner of your dreams.
You might have a perfect family growing up.
And maybe like that gives you happiness. But what you going to do when the trials come? What are you going to do when the troubles come? When the all manner of sorrow comes knocking at your door, you're gonna be able to cope.
Well, just look at the lot of every man. Your life is eventually going to end. Where you're going to be? What's going to happen to you? Your family's not going to save you. Your job is not going to save you from this end. You'll end up naked. Everyone is going to end up dead in the end. So the question is, what is your assessment of that? We would proclaim, and okay, so far we've talked about work quite a lot, mostly. We've made some connections with various people and writers you can read and refer to, and we've talked about the uniqueness of Christ. So now we're just going to draw this whole conversation to a close. Do you have any comments to make at the end?
Yes, I'd just like to remind the reader, the listener, that it's been an extemporary format. If you're dissatisfied with, I'll speak for myself more, with some of the lack of order amongst my thoughts or the progression in the topic, well, I will endeavour to improve that. I would also like to add that these topics have many great scope, and that if there's some specifics we need to develop, identify and develop, because it may have seemed that some general comments have suffered from too much generality without getting into the actual experience of people. I mean, we can look at the matter from a personal level, as far as work goes, from a personal level. Your responsibilities, what you're entitled to refuse, what you ought to accept, what you ought to develop, and then what those around you have obligations, like the government, to help and not hinder you. But we can go in far greater depth into like the sort of life and lifestyle, and offer like our thoughts about how you ought to be dealing with things and resisting things and choosing like more positive alternatives, even for the non-Christian. All right. And branch then into a massive topic about the singularity of Christ, and we're emphasising his uniqueness, which we can develop in greater depth, and then we can also talk about the Bible as the Word of God and deal specifically with various passages, and we can deal with a lot of the hard and controversial topics also. All right, I'll sign off.
Cool. Yeah. Nice. So yeah, we talked about work. We gave a definition. We talked about various influential figures in this concept. Aristotle. Clearly, the Bible is significant. It's a massive portion of our history that has to be taken into consideration. Major development of our culture and all that. And we talked about the uniqueness of Jesus Christ, another figure that is unparalleled in history of humanity. And we also gave you various references. These are the 3 topics that we agreed on, and we've covered them. So I'd like to thank you guys for listening, and I'd encourage you to look at my Subscribestar page to donate to this channel, help things progress along. Also, like and subscribe on the YouTube, and we will looking forward to seeing you later, and thank you.